All right. Hi, and welcome to the vipHome podcast. I'm Dana from vipHome Link. Today we have quite the crew from FEMA. So I will turn it over to you guys to introduce yourselves.
All right. Hi, my name is Pataya Scott. I'm a civil engineer in the Earthquake and Wind Programs branch, and I've been with FEMA almost 5 years. It'll be 5 years in January. And I mostly do wind and seismic.
Hello, my name is Mike Mahoney. I am a physical scientist with the same group, the Earthquake and Wind Programs branch. I've been with FEMA 38 years. Done several different events over the course of that time. And I primarily work with building codes and making them better for resisting earthquakes, as well as putting out various guidance documents that help engineers, architects, building owners, homeowners make their buildings better to resist earthquakes. So happy to be here.
Well, thank you both again for joining us today. So North Carolina experienced an earthquake in August, and as we all know, California feels them from time to time. Realistically, in the United States, where do homeowners need to worry about earthquakes, or is it everywhere?
So I guess I'll start on this one and say that according to the U.S. Geological Survey, about half the states in our country can experience a damaging earthquake. Most of them are centered around fault lines, the boundaries between two plates, such as California. The famous San Andreas Fault is the boundary between the North American plate and the Pacific plate, and obviously and the related faults associated with that boundary, and that they get the bulk of the numbers of earthquakes, right? Not necessarily the most severe earthquakes. They can be very much so, but there are other parts of the country within the North American plate where for some reason there's a fault there or a weak spot in the plate, and they can get earthquakes that can be just as severe. Probably the most famous one is in 1811 and 1812. We had three magnitude 8 plus earthquakes in the New Madrid area, which is the border between Tennessee and Arkansas and Missouri. So those areas can get very bad earthquakes as well. And there are other faults all throughout the country. The Wasatch Fault in Salt Lake City, the Seattle Fault up in Seattle. There's a fault outside of Charleston, South Carolina. They've all had damaging earthquakes, over the course of our history. Even up in Boston, the Cape Ann earthquake caused damage in Boston. So they can occur a lot of different places. We actually have a really good map showing those areas where those earthquakes can occur in some of our publications, and we'll get to those a little bit. But the one I'm referring to is earthquake safety at home. It's FEMA P530, and we might be able to bring up a graphic showing that, I guess.
So as we're talking about preparation, which is so important, what percentage of homeowners would you say are actually prepared for earthquakes and the damage they can cause?
Yeah, well, it's hard to say the percentage. I don't know if we could quantify that, but we definitely need to get more outreach and education on seismic hazards. And we're working on that with FEMA through NEHRP grants, and that NEHRP is the National Earthquake Hazard Reduction Program. And it was required by Congress for 4 federal agencies. It's us, FEMA, NSF, right? USGS and NIST. And NIST is the lead agency. And through NEHRP, we have some federal funding for grants and projects that can help building owners and homeowners mitigate damage from earthquakes for their homes and businesses.
Yeah. I would add those grants actually go to the states that have a moderate to high hazard, and those states then work with their jurisdictions to help improve their preparedness. So it's not all just federal. It's we help support states to do the same thing, and I guess you can never be too prepared, and we do put out some publications to help in that regard. Things you can do before, during, and after an earthquake to help you be prepared. such as the earthquake safety checklist. FEMA B526. And that's a really just bullet list of things to help you be prepared.
What would you say is the one thing that a homeowner should do if they live in an earthquake, prone area in their home, just to help reduce damage within their home and stay safe?
So so there are a number of things you can do, right? The number
Right.
one thing that I always recommend you start with is your water heater. Water heaters are very tall, very narrow, very heavy, and almost always fall over in an earthquake. And when they do, they can rupture the water line, cause flooding in your basement. And if they're natural gas fired, they can rupture the natural gas line and create a fire hazard. So the best way to prevent that from happening is to use metal straps, wrap around the water heater, and then secure that strap back to the wall studs.
Mm-hmm.
And screw them in and do that several, up on top of the water heater and halfway down,
Right.
to really support that. And we have some graphics we show, of how to do that. That's probably the number one thing, but there are other things as well. Anything heavy in your home is going to respond to the earthquake shaking and fall. So if you have heavy objects up on your shelves or your shelves themselves, they should really be bracketed back to the wall studs. Just a little simple strap you screw into the shelf and to the stud would help keep things from falling over, possibly causing injury in an earthquake. So, and we have another publication that we promote for that purpose. It's actually called the Earthquake Home Hazard Hunt. It's FEMA V528. And it shows a graph of a house and several different things within the house that could fall over and be damaged in an earthquake or cause injury. So we highlight those things, and then on the back of that chart, it describes how to actually do those things. So it's a really neat little tool that we hand out at home fairs and the like for people to identify the problems in their house.
And super helpful to have that graphic so people actually can see what they need to do and follow it up, with actually how to do it, not just see it.
Absolutely.
So what are tips for after an earthquake strikes, though? What are homeowners supposed to do? I feel like, maybe people might be frozen after it happens, that panic sets in. So
there's two common reactions. One is the freeze in place, and the other is to try and run out of the building. And running out of the building is the worst thing you can do, because things will fall off the building as the earthquake's happening. And there are people who have been killed by that. So you start with what to do during the shaking. And what to do during the shaking is what we call drop, cover, and hold. You drop to the ground, you cover your head in case something falls on it, you're trying to protect yourself.
Right.
And if you can cover yourself like under a table, under a desk or whatever to protect yourself, then do that. So drop, cover, and hold. Once the shaking stops and you know that it stopped, then we recommend getting out of the building. And in case it's been damaged and could possibly collapse.
Right.
And then once you're out of the building, take a look at the building. If it looks like it's still on the foundation, still not damaged or leaning or anything like that, then it may be safe to go in, but don't do so unless you're sure. But there are things, if you do go back in, there are things to check for. Do you smell gas? If so, shut off the gas supply. The electricity is probably going to be off already anyway, but if not, and you detect damage, and shut the electric off as well. And then just take care of yourself is the main thing. Be safe. It's going to be a very stressful environment after an earthquake. Don't do anything that's going to get you, that could hurt yourself. And hopefully you have a kit ready to have your, water and food and what you need to survive after an earthquake.
So we were talking about when an earthquake is happening and things are shaking and falling, about how long do earthquakes typically last? Does it range? And then what happens is if there's that, after effect also.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
when is it safe to actually step out of your home?
Right. Great questions. Earthquake duration can vary widely. Generally, they're seconds, right? But they can, In some cases, especially what we call subduction earthquakes that happen off the Pacific Northwest, those can go for minutes. So really, it's just protect yourself until you feel that the shaking has stopped,
Mhm.
right? And then you're absolutely right. There are going to be aftershocks. Aftershocks are normally not as severe as the main shock that's happened, but they can still be severe enough to cause additional damage and injury. So don't put yourself into a position where if an aftershock happens, you're going to get injured.
Okay, great. So to give our listeners a sense of the overwhelming strength of these storms, as they're can be very powerful. Would you like to share, or do you have a few examples from personal experience in the field?
Yes, I've been through. I was deployed after the Northridge earthquake in Los Angeles, as well as a couple of earthquakes since then. Seen houses that usually older homes where they weren't properly bolted to the foundation and literally slid off their foundation and fell over. One of the things to check obviously is your home bolted to the foundation. Also seen damage for for example, masonry chimneys, brick chimneys tend to do pretty poorly in earthquakes. They're just so heavy, right? And so tall. Seen a lot of collapsed chimneys, seen them where they collapse into the house and have caused injury. That was one of the most severe injuries in the Napa earthquake about five or 7 years ago. So there are different things that you need to be aware of that can happen to a home when it experiences earthquake shaking. Pataya, I don't know if you have anything to add. Or
No, I guess one of the other things to consider is the buildings around you. Even if your building maybe performed well, a building next to you might be about to fall over onto your building. So don't just look at your immediate surroundings, kind of look at the whole area just to see if you're safe.
That's a very good point. Yeah, thank you for that. So what kind of hazards are there or could there be after an earthquake, such as fires, landslides, electrocution?
all the above. Fire following an earthquake is a real hazard. I mentioned before about natural gas lines breaking, and that can cause significant fires. But it more importantly, it can cause a lot of fires, right? A lot of small fires. And the first responders, the fire department, they're going to be overstretched immediately, and it's going to be up to you in some cases to if you have a small fire, it might be up to you to put it out, because the fire department may not be able to respond right away.
Right.
Landslides in that type of terrain, absolutely yes. That's pretty common, especially where you have a very wet environment. Climate change causing rain in some areas, that can actually increase the probability of a landslide happening. Something need to be aware of. And electrocution is always a concern. Don't approach any wires that are down until you know for a fact that the electricity has been shut off. So
Right. No, those are all good things to consider. So since some damage cannot be prevented, should homeowners in high-risk areas invest in earthquake insurance? And if so, what does that look like?
yeah, that's very important, and it's important to think of you're responding not just in a physical sense, but also a financial sense, right? If you have a home where you've got a large investment in, you have equity in that home, right? You need to protect that, and probably the best way to protect that is to have an earthquake insurance policy. It's not part of your normal homeowner's policy. It has to be a separate policy, much like flood is the same way as well.
Right.
So look into having an earthquake insurance policy. The thing to be aware of on earthquake insurance is it can sometimes have a pretty high deductible. So be aware of how you're going to cover that deductible as well. If it's a large enough earthquake where it's a federal disaster declaration, then the Small Business Administration has what they call disaster loans, where they'll actually give out low interest loans. That could be part of your plan as well. You cover that deductible with a low interest loan, and then the insurance covers the rest of it. But there are different options, but you need to look into that to make sure you cover your investment.
Right. So are there certain things that are covered and certain things for earthquake insurance that they don't cover? Or is pretty much everything?
Yeah, generally everything's covered as long as it's attributable to the earthquake, right?
Right.
Gone into a lot of buildings where the owner's pointing to cracks in the foundation, but the cracks have paint or dirt in them. So I know that wasn't part of the
They're
earthquake.
a little older. Yeah, right. So does the insurance look different for a renter versus a homeowner?
It is, but they do have policies for both. For a renter, you're normally just protecting your contents, right?
Right.
And the owner has, hopefully has insurance on the building.
So it's something to look into in those,
Yep.
Prone areas to make sure that your landlord does have that insurance.
Yeah, and that you have insurance on your contents at the same time.
Right. Okay, so are there other types of insurance homeowners should get, like the parametric insurance? Or
Yeah, that's no, great question. And I think that's something that should be looked into. Parametric insurance covers things beyond the basic insurance, like, loss of use or something or whatever. And, if that's something that's going to impact you, then it should be something you look into. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, well, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you feel our readers and listeners, should be aware of?
Well, I'll let Patsy go first, then I will. So
I guess Mike's already mentioned some of our FEMA publications. I don't know if you could show them on the screen or something, but
Yes,
like FEMA P530 Earthquake Safety at Home is a good document for homeowners to read. It has great information. And then FEMA 528, the Earthquake Home Hazard Hunt poster that Mike had mentioned also, and then FEMA B 526 Earthquake Safety Checklist. That was the reference guide that Mike had mentioned earlier as well. I think those are just some great resources for homeowners.
yeah, and you can find them all online, and you can actually also order them paper copies from FEMA as well. So the one thing I would say is, and I kind of started to allude to this, is after a large earthquake, first responders are going to be inundated,
Right.
and you're going to be on your own for days. We say 3 days. If it's a large enough earthquake, it's going to be longer than that. And I would just emphasize, be prepared for that, right? Make sure you have what you need to survive for that time, because you're not going to be able to run to the store. You're not going to be able to, you're probably not going to have power or communication. So have a plan, and have an earthquake kit that you can, that's ready and you can get to it, that has water, has food, has medicine, has whatever you need to survive. As I mean, first responders are amazing, but they and God love them. We help where we can, but it's just going to be too much, and you're going to be responsible for yourself and for your neighbors, and just be aware of that.
Yeah, I often hear people in California say they have tennis shoes in their cars just in case. I guess that's a good.
You know what? It's smart. You have to be prepared, and talking to your family and neighbors and friends about what their plan is, is helpful all around for sure.
Yeah, because cell towers will probably be down. So if you have a good meeting point.
Right. Well, bottom line is everybody should be prepared, be safe, be patient.
Absolutely.
Keep yourself protected. Oh, this was great. I really appreciate you guys coming on today and giving all of our readers and listeners all of this great information and ways for them to be prepared in their home. And we look forward to many more podcasts with you guys in the future.
Pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you guys.